Hey guys, welcome. We are doing chapter 9 today of Unlearn Your Anxiety and Depression by Dr. Schubiner. And I'm going to go ahead and get started with um, our PowerPoint or with the slides because we do have a lot to get through. If you remember some of chapter 8, we kind of did depending on your version of the book. So if some of this is a repeat, some of it we kind of have talked about before because there was some confusion of the editions of the book. We did 2 parts of chapter 8, and hopefully we're all on the same page today for chapter 9. Oh, hey, Melissa, she waved. All right, I'm gonna share my screen and we'll get going with our slides. Oh, all right, we'll get the chat up there. So feel free to pop anything in the chat if you have a question or comment, and we'll go ahead with this is week 3 of the workbook section. So dialogues towards understanding. So just as a reminder, the same areas of the brain are activated with both physical and emotional injuries, or it could even be the threat of an emotional injury, right? Like someone was a bully in grade school, and then when I'm going to a group of people, there might be a threat of not being accepted because of that, emotional injury that happened as a child. So the brain can activate pain or symptoms because of any of those things, not just physical injury. Reminder, the brain can cause pain, fatigue, insomnia, anxiety, and depression from emotional memories. And lessons learned early in life create pathways that are stored in the brain or stored in the danger/alarm mechanism of the brain. So this is a danger signal. This is an alarm signal when we have these symptoms. That's it. That's all it's telling us. It doesn't mean that something physically has gone wrong, even though we feel it physically in the body. And then often, early life stressors do not cause the development of symptoms at that time. So sometimes people ask, well, if all this was because of my childhood, how come in my childhood I didn't feel anything? It wasn't till my 20s or 30s or whatever. That's normal. That's how it normally happens. The most common emotions, not emotions, emotions stored in the emotional memory are fear, anger, guilt, shame, and sadness or grief. So as we go through these, see how they might apply to you. Fear is just kind of an overarching term for all of this kind of stuff. So it could be the flight response, anxiety disorders of OCD, PTSD, social phobias, and panic disorders. Those might be diagnoses you would hear that are a heightened flight response. And if you think of fight or flight, there's this activation. A lot of people actually don't go into fight. Some do, not everyone. And flight is actually much more common, or freeze, which is like the depression and or fatigue. So with anger and resentment, anger is a healthier response to being hurt than is fear because you feel more powerful. So like I said, with fight or flight, most people, especially when this occurs when we're children, our nervous system determines it's safest to go into flight or freeze than to fight. Like it would say it's not smart to fight a tiger, right? So if there's someone who has more power than you, it's not always smart to fight them. So at a subconscious level, anger can be repressed. So children are powerless to express their anger, thus they learn to hold anger in. And then beginning to stand up for yourself and be more assertive are often components in unlearning your pain. So I know for myself, I didn't feel a lot of anger. I just thought I'm not the kind of person that feels a lot of anger. I go more towards sadness. And it's just because I learned very young, I think, that anger is not good, right? We're not supposed to be angry at things. Good girls aren't angry. Control yourself. Yeah, Melissa says same here. So just because I don't normally get angry at things, it's because not because I shouldn't get angry at things. If someone violates your boundaries, you do want to stand up for yourself. But I was kind of trained to just, there's no, it doesn't help to do that, right? It doesn't help to get angry about stuff. And so it's not like I'm consciously suppressing it, but I can suppress anger without really realizing it. A lot of times what I would do is turn these kind of things towards guilt. So we talked about guilt a little last week, but it's always good to review. You might have a conscious guilt that consists of the feelings that many people have for things they regret having done, right? So, you might not have showed up to something that you said you were going to show up to, and you feel guilty about it. And then there could be subconscious guilt. The guilt one feels for the resentment and anger that is held towards others. So you could um, think something like, I wish that person was dead, and then feel really guilty because what kind of person would say that? Something must be wrong with me that I said that. So a lot of us, like me, I wouldn't feel a ton of anger, but if I did feel anger, I would feel guilt about it. So facing it can lead to the release of grief and open the door to true healing. Because if we're carrying all this stuff around, of course, we're going to be in a fear state more often, and the danger alarm mechanism is going to sound more often. And so, shame, people who are not fully loved or accepted in their childhood, or were frequently told that they weren't good enough or smart enough or attractive enough, tend to develop shame. Shame is the belief that one isn't a good person, isn't worthy of being loved, or doesn't deserve to be happy. So think again if any of this can apply to you. Shame, guilt and shame are anger turned inward. So, you may have heard it said like guilt is thinking that you've done something wrong. Shame is thinking there's something wrong with you. And at a fundamental level, a lot of us feel unworthy or that we might not be normal or something's not right with us. And that can be that shame. So, other emotions that are commonly held and that we can express and release are sadness and grief. So, it could be losses, such as the loss of the physical presence or affection from important people in our lives. So, maybe someone passed on, or maybe they just physically, emotionally weren't present, and that can feel like a loss. You could also feel like a loss of time that you have not been able to experience some of the things that other people have experienced because of what's been going on with your body, with pain. So sadness and that feeling of loss is really common. Sadness and grief often need to be experienced, expressed, and released in order to fully heal from mind-body syndrome. And he says this can come in layers, right? It's not just like we do one time of release and we never feel sad about things again. We want to come to this place of love. So when we're able to truly experience love, caring, and kindness towards ourselves and towards others, healing on a deep level occurs and mind-body symptoms melt away. So when we just think about there's love and fear, generally those two emotions. And when you're in that feeling of love, you're not in that feeling of fear. So it's not activating the danger signals of the brain. And that's why you don't have the symptoms. So many people with mind-body syndrome are unable to say that they are a good person or that they love themselves. That is something I really had to learn. I thought, for no matter what I did, I just wasn't good enough, not a good person. I should be better. I should do more for other people, right? I should be doing more. But that kept my nervous system in a constant state of flight, like I was being chased by a tiger when I was the tiger, right? I was just so hard on myself. So loving myself was a huge, huge thing for my recovery, really. And the exercises in this book are designed to release suppressed anger, let go of guilt and shame, allow grief to be experienced, and then move towards loving relationships with yourself and others. Then old anxieties and fears don't weigh upon you, and the normal stress of everyday life becomes more easily manageable. Right? You're not carrying around all that extra baggage of those suppressed emotions and old anxieties and fears. So you're better able to tolerate the day-to-day stressors. And that's what we're going to do in emotional awareness and expression therapy, EAET. And as a reminder, Dr. Schubiner says not everyone with MBS will need to engage in this type of emotional processing work. And if you do, it's, you don't have to see it as, something's wrong with you, or it's, you're unlucky. Even if you weren't doing some of this work because you had pain or other symptoms of anxiety or depression, if you had, some things in your childhood that haven't been processed, then it'll show up in your life in different ways. So, I would just say this emotional processing work is really good no matter what you have going on symptom wise, because, if things aren't going well in our lives now, and we have a lot of these emotions of anger, guilt, grief, anxiety, depression, and pain, then this process can help us just become aware of what's there and express it and release it. So that's the process, is to uncover and release emotions. And then healing occurs very rapidly once these emotions are mobilized. So dealing with anger, if you read through the chapter, there are several cases that Dr. Schubiner dictates, or he has, the dialogue there, what he says, what the patient says. And there's one with a client named Michael, whose father was an alcoholic and would rage a lot. So Dr. Schubiner has him think of a time that he felt anger, not just hurt, because Michael kept wanting to go to the hurt. Oh, I feel hurt, right? And that's more of the freeze. Anger is more of the fight. So it was hard to even get him a little bit to feel that anger. And he felt it in his stomach, and he was repressing the anger. So Dr. Schubiner leads him through this process of imagining a certain time, what happened, and then if that child could say or express or do something to become more powerful and free, what would that be? So he has him, he would say things like, Father, I hate you. You have no right to do that to me. You've treated me this way for too many times, for too long. I'm angry. I'm mad. I won't stand for it. I deserve to be treated better. And, Dr. Schubiner will have people yell, if they're like, I hate you, he'd say, yell it, I hate you, right? So this is becoming aware and expressing these emotions. And then he even has people imagine, what would the anger do? And I like this distinction. It's not like, what would you do when you're really angry? It's what would the anger do? And it might, that kid that was defenseless, it might push his father, or it might shove him, or it might kick him. And Dr. Schubiner said there's some things that would probably be triggering to tell people. He was actually doing a training once, and someone stopped him and said, you want to be, careful for people who've had trauma and could get triggered, because the anger might imagine doing something pretty violent to that person that there's anger around, right? And I'm just saying this to normalize that this is actually the process to get to a healthier relationship with that person. Although it feels counterintuitive, it might feel like, how does me imagining, really mean things change anything? And it's just giving that defenseless child another way of handling that situation. Even though we can't change that, you can reconsolidate memories that we're talking about later in this chapter. So So, you don't even have to be angry at that person in real life in order for it to heal that situation for you and actually improve the relationship with that person. Which is good because sometimes the people that we're really angry at have passed on, and so we can't do anything, to make it right in this time anyway. But this is the beauty of it. You don't have to have one conversation with that person. You can do this all, through these methods with a coach, with a therapist, through writing. So you can let go of the hurt and humiliation, or that's what he did. He let go of the hurt and humiliation, became powerful, and expressed the inner rage that had been held in his mind and body for so many years. He overcame the subconscious guilt about feeling anger towards his father. And it wasn't the anger that he currently had towards his father, but the anger that the child had towards his father. And then you can have anger mixed with guilt. So situations later in life may have caused anger and then have guilt for being angry. It would not be uncommon for a parent who is very stressed out with a crying baby to say something like, I wish you were never born. It doesn't mean that we actually really wish that, but there are sometimes as people, we say things like that in anger. So this is our chance to know that, to look at this, to examine this, why we're feeling guilty, to have compassion with ourselves for being the best human we could at that time. Okay. And as I was just saying, it does result in healthier relationships overall. So that's why I love this process, because again, it sounds so weird, like how is this going to change anything? But when we can clean up our end of it, it would either help us draw a better boundary with that person or to not see them in that same way so that things could be healthier overall. And Mary says, oh, this is good. I'm feeling so much better since I joined this book club and one-to-one sessions with Betsy, and joined a grief therapy group for caregiving for my mom and her death last year. All have helped me realize I was too hard on myself, and more importantly, that my feelings are so very normal. Many people in the grief group have had very similar feelings, and it really helped to process together. Right? Like when you just know, oh, our brains produce these types of thoughts sometimes, and it doesn't mean that you're a bad person, and it doesn't mean you didn't love your mom, then, it's just helpful to know this is normal. This is what brains do. We don't have to repress it, but we also don't have to, torment ourselves for years feeling guilty with things. So feelings with loss. There's an example where someone had anger. The mom had died and there was guilt that they couldn't do more. There was sadness. And by carrying the feelings of loss and resentment and guilt and sadness, he was holding on to hurt and pain that continued to affect his mind and body. I think this was someone whose mom had died when he was a teenager. So he forgave himself for being overwhelmed. And then it turned to his father. So, it's really interesting to watch how Dr. Schubiner kind of guides people through these feelings. And then he asked about, how he felt about his father. And he was actually angry at his father too, because once his mom died, his father, kind of buried himself in his work and didn't really, I guess the boy at that time, didn't get the love and attention that he needed. So Dr. Schubiner uses this several times. You'll see throughout the chapter. This is actually, you may recognize it from mindfulness meditations, from Metta, METTA. So what he did was imagine that child, the boy at 16 when he lost his mom, and imagine telling him or having him, asking if he could be peaceful and contented. May I be free from harm and illness. May I be forgiving and forgiven. And then he had him repeat it for the other person. So in this session, they were able to get to like feeling compassionate towards the father. And that doesn't always happen so easily, right? So if there was like an abuser, you don't feel like you have to go all the way to, wishing that person well. But at least if we can have compassion for ourselves, then that releases so much of the burden that we're carrying. So just know it may be easier to start with, well, he talks about this later, someone that you really care about or someone you love unconditionally, like a pet, repeating this for them and then repeating it for yourself. There are defenses that come up when we're starting to do this work, especially when we're starting to try to feel anger and we're not used to feeling anger and there's resistance. You might notice things like fear, worry, rationalization. They were trying their best. They did what they could. Okay, true, but this isn't the place for that, right? You just like put a pin in that. We'll think about that later. When you want to express the anger, we're not thinking about all of those other things and defending those people, right? We're not trying to rationalize. We are not trying to have laughter or minimize, right? So someone might say something they were really abused a lot and then they laugh, right? That's just one of the natural defenses. And so just watch for doing that yourself. Minimizing or forgetting events, becoming numb, or displacing anger towards others are all ways that the mind avoids strong feelings, right? So displacing anger towards others. I can think of so many examples of that where the wife is blaming the husband for something, and that pattern actually was started from a fear in childhood and some misplaced emotions there. So there's some cognitive methods, there's writing and verbal expression that would be going over it with someone. And Dr. Schubiner has trained a lot of people in this method. So myself being one, but there are also a lot of other therapists and coaches that do this. So memory reconsolidation. This is such a cool concept. We talked about it a little last week because the chapters were kind of jumbled up in the old edition of the book. So if you remember from last week, we talked about memories. So memories are not only often inaccurate, but they're constantly changing, right? It's not just like a file cabinet that we go and pull out the file and there's the memory. Our memory, they've shown this over and over with eyewitness accounts. Sometimes people actually claiming, yeah, I saw that plane crash and there's no footage of the plane crash, but they'd heard about it and they were in the area. And so they remembered it as if they'd seen it. So don't trust your memories. And just know that the good news is we can reconsolidate or change or reframe some of our memories since we can't change what happened in the past. Since your past is merely a summation of your memory of it, and your memory is constantly changing, your past is actually also changing all the time. So that sounds weird to say, and it's not to, be like, you just remembered that wrong. That didn't really happen. We're not trying to shame anyone, right? We're just saying, hey, there's a possibility that your brain is like everyone else's, that just when you go to remember something, compiles that and other things you've heard that are similar, and it could give you different information each time. Yes, and Mary, it's interesting how different siblings' memories are about events, right? Right? Yeah, this happened with my siblings. We were compiling some stuff about my grandparents, and then they're like, what color was that toilet? Was it red? Someone remembered it as gold. No one lives in that house anymore that we know, so we can't go check. So we're like, we just don't even know. We had different memories of it. So, like I said, the good news about this is you can learn to view and experience your memories differently. And again, this is not going back, not again, I don't know why I said that, but this is not going back to relive it. This is going back to change it. So some people might be hesitant, especially if there's really traumatic stuff and abuse. It's not to like, oh, let's go through every single incident where that happened. Usually all you need is one memory. And again, it's not to go through sequentially what happened. It's more about the feeling around it and going back and experiencing those feelings and experiencing them differently instead of feeling, going into flight or freeze, being able to go into fight and what would have been said or could have been done if, hypothetically, you could express that anger. So go to unlearnyourpain.com. If you have the books, he has the password there for you so that you can do either of these two meditations. There's the time traveler and revisiting the past. So important stuff that you can do through these meditations or with someone. It's you just mainly want to feel safe doing it. So EAET process, just a summary. Remember, the ongoing fear is what activates the danger alarm mechanism, which leads to more pain, anxiety, or depression. So it's the fear we want to decrease. While anger leads to feeling powerful, which can reduce the danger alarm mechanism and reduce symptoms. So all of those fear-based responses where you're not feeling powerful, you'll have more pain because there's more danger, right? If you're feeling more powerful, you feel less danger and less symptoms. That's why anger can be this important emotion on the way out of all of these negative feelings. Experiencing the emotions of anger, guilt, and grief, typically in that order, and expressing them fully in order to release them. So that's interesting, right? It's usually anger that we're able to kind of dig up, even though it might be way down there. And then it usually does turn to guilt because so many people feel guilt for having that anger, for thinking, I should be the one taking care of my mom. I should be the one, helping them, and they're a child, so we want to look at that guilt, express that, look at that grief, express that. And the defenses, we talked about some, but again, you might go to the hurt. So when people start to get really into the hurt and the sadness, it's okay to feel that, oh, I feel that sadness. And then is there any anger there? You'll see Dr. Schubiner do that in those dialogues, because we want to turn it back to anger. Going to the hurt is just a defense to not feel that anger. You might minimize it wasn't so bad. You might blame yourself. You might have symptoms that feel defensive, like tightening in your body with pain, feeling anxious and upset. You might get dizzy. I've had that happen with people, or weak or tired. Our minds might have trouble focusing and losing our train of thought. These are defenses. So we're getting closer, getting warmer, and then you start to have these physical symptoms, almost like, hey, this is dangerous. Don't come over here. Don't try to change this. But we do want to let that anger be expressed, right? And then acting out violently is a defense, right? So if we're like not repressing our anger, but we're not feeling it appropriately, we could take it in different directions. And we don't want to be doing that either. That's not going to actually express the anger, right? That's like a reaction to the anger to act out violently. Okay, so step one, I like how he breaks things down into steps so we can just conceptualize. Okay, first one, experiencing emotions. So take one of the items on your list from pages 94 through 96, the list of past traumatic or stressful events. So you can take an item from that list, or you can just think to yourself, like, what is an event, that really sticks out in my mind? See what emotions arise when you mentally go back to that situation. So if there's anger, guilt, sadness, you can let those emotions come up. When they talk about processing the emotion, it's basically feeling it, not resisting it, feeling, the tightness in the body or whatever it is that emotion feels like in your body, letting it come up and not resisting it. And then eventually you'll move towards that compassion for yourself. Step two, allowing anger to be expressed. So if you're turning towards that hurt or sadness about that situation, think about how you could have been angry, and you might have to work a little bit at this, right? Some people just naturally do not like to feel this emotion, but we want to show the body that it's safe. So you could speak the words that you would have said, or what anger would have said. Scream and yell, be forceful, speak honestly, use swear words freely to help you experience the anger. That's actually been shown to decrease pain. Using a well-placed swear word actually decreases your pain. Not if you swear all the time, but if you're really mad and you swear, it does. You deserve to be angry, that you were hurt, and that you will not tolerate that. Okay, so despite anything else that you want to blame yourself for, really getting into that part of the story of, hey, I did not deserve this, no matter what I've been told. Feel the anger, watch for the defenses, and release that anger with deep breaths. Step 3, look for the guilt. Remember, guilt usually will come up after the anger. So if the anger leads to significant guilt and or sadness, the process of healing is on track and will result in significant relief of emotional burden and mind-body symptoms if you allow compassion, usually in the forms of tears and grief to soothe the guilt. So guilt going towards compassion or even grief is still a step in the right direction. And then antidotes for guilt and shame. My anger is justified. I did nothing wrong. You don't have to think about, technically each little thing. Well, my mom told me to put both shoes away and I only put one. We're like, no, I should not have been treated like that, right? I did nothing wrong. I didn't deserve that treatment. I'm a good person. It was not my fault. I was only doing the best I could. I was caught in a difficult situation. I was just looking for love. And most importantly, I forgive myself fully and completely. And if that doesn't feel accessible, you could start with, it might be possible that I could forgive myself, right? And then work towards there all the way to fully and completely. That's a little, that's the other end of the extreme, right? But self-compassion can be something really hard for a lot of us. Experiencing sadness and grief. It can arise spontaneously after releasing the anger. And again, you can tell yourself things like, I just wanted to be loved. I just wanted you to love me. I was lonely, sad, hurt, or ashamed. I was afraid, or I wish things could have been different. That might be a nice one that is general, right? You don't have to say, I did nothing wrong. But, working your way towards, I do wish things could have been different. And then step 5, getting to this place of love and or letting go. So listen to some of the online meditations each day. Place your hand over your heart, breathe deeply, feel your breath filling up your whole body. Breathe in kindness to yourself. Allow feelings of kindness to fill your lungs. Visualize kindness spreading to every cell and fiber of your body. Repeat these phrases. I'm a good person. I've done the best I could. I love myself. I choose to take time for myself. I deserve to be happy, and any others that make sense to you. Repeat these wishes for yourself. May I be peaceful and contented. May I be free from harm and illness. May I be loving and loved. May I be forgiving and forgiven. Does that sound familiar? So this is a process. Don't feel like you have to get there immediately. Understand that this could be seen as the hardest part. If you weren't really taught to love yourself, then everything in your nervous system is going to kind of resist, just accepting and saying, yeah, I'm fine, I'm okay, rather than finding all the imperfections. So that's the goal, though. You could also think of the people that you want in your life, and may they be peaceful and contented. May they be free from harm and illness. May they be loving and loved. May they be forgiving and forgiven. Again, these are just more of these phrases. You can't hurt me anymore. I'm through with you. I won't allow you to hurt me anymore. I will protect myself from you. I will set boundaries and not allow you to cross them. Or I love myself enough not to be hurt by you again. So that sounds a lot more than like someone who's standing up for themselves, not just, thinking, okay, I deserve this, right? This is much stronger and more powerful and maybe foreign, right? When you imagine your younger self, you could tell your younger self, you're a good person. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't deserve to be treated that way. You'll be okay. Because you know now you'll be okay. You'll get through this. You'll come out okay. I will love you. You are now safe and I will protect you. I will care for you and you are not alone. Healing your younger self's hurts also heals yours because it turns down that danger signal, right? You could do that that loving kindness meditation by picturing someone who you love unconditionally, such as a spouse, parent, sibling, or child, or pet. Imagine offering love and caring for that person or pet. Allow yourself to feel those feelings completely. And then imagine that person giving you similar offerings of kindness, caring, and love. So if it's hard to access that love for yourself, this is one way in, is thinking of that love you have for someone else and then thinking if you could feel that for yourself. You could also think of someone whom you hold in great esteem, like a parent, grandparent, teacher, a great leader, wise person, a religious leader, political leader, educator, or healer. Imagine that person or entity is listening to your situation. I don't know what I meant there. Is listening to your situation, I think. Imagine what they would tell you, what advice they would give, and what words they would use. So there's this section where you can write down all of these issues. And so here are some examples. The issue being physical and emotional abuse about my ex-husband. And then what are the things that show that you've had anger or resentment? I've expressed my anger towards him and killed him in my mind. Not a problem, right? We don't have to worry about that. That's totally a way of expressing anger in a healthy way, killing him in your mind. Sounds weird maybe, but it's actually that healthy aggression rather than doing it in real life or repressing it and thinking you're bad for thinking that. Okay, guilt, shame. It was not my fault, but I feel I could have left him earlier. I forgive myself for this, and as I wanted to try to keep the family together as long as I could, right? So he or she, well, she, I guess maybe is noticing, I guess it could be he or she, noticing the guilt because of turning that inward and forgiving themselves. So sadness and grief. I've expressed my sadness in tears. Love and letting go. I love myself. I forgive him, but I will protect myself from him so he can't hurt me anymore. And then lessons learned. I will only enter into new relationships that are not abusive. Actions, I will act with civility towards him, but set boundaries on how often I can see him and speak to him. If he acts aggressively, I will immediately stop the conversation and leave. So this is an example how you can fill out this section. There's one more example. Issue, my boss is controlling and micromanaging. And then what's the anger and resentment about this? Have you, felt it and expressed it? I've expressed my anger towards him privately and have released it. I know I will not change him. Guilt, shame. I feel no guilt about my anger towards him. I've done nothing wrong and I have no shame. So this is another example, right? You don't have to feel guilt and shame. You don't have to. This one is just about anger. Sadness and grief. It's sad. I do not enjoy my work as much as I could. Love and letting go. I love myself. I let go of my dependence on his approval, and I will protect myself from his controlling ways. Lessons learned. There are many bosses like him, and I hope to get a different one soon. Actions. I'll go to work each day with a positive attitude and apply for different jobs this year. Right? What a huge change rather than just going every day being mad and wishing your boss was different. So writing exercises for week 3 are dialogues When we engage in a dialogue from our heart, we can say what needs to be said and hear what we need to hear. The dialogue with people could be some of those that you've never met, with religious leaders, political figures, or even God. You could converse with one or more of your body parts that are causing you discomfort. You could do a dialogue with your subconscious mind. You could do your inner parent or inner child personality traits that you've learned. So you could dialogue with that worrying part of yourself, the self-critical self, the overly conscientious or perfectionistic self, right? You could dialogue with any of those parts of you, your future self, some point in the future when you've recovered from mind-body syndrome. And then you could dialogue, like I said, with the symptom, whether it's pain, anxiety, depression, insomnia, or fatigue, or all the other hundreds. Dialogues towards understanding. So there's last time when I did this chapter for Unlearn Your Pain, I didn't realize after all those writing exercises, there's still more to the chapter. So he talks about the IFS, internal family systems approach. Generally, the concept is we are made of different parts, right? Like I was saying, part of us might want to kill someone, and part of us says, no way, that was wrong. So we have these different parts. That's how we are. Often a coping mechanism or way for our brain to protect us from stressors. So that is often something we can develop and can be really highly used. For example, if you were criticized by a parent, you may develop a strong internal critic that protects you from being anything less than perfect to avoid more criticism. So managers are traits like perfectionism, internal criticism, putting others first, never standing out, overworking, not letting others get close to us, and feeling insecure and needy. So those are those parts of us that are trying to protect, but we're not really being ourselves. If we feel particularly threatened and our brains really feel endangered, other protectors known as firefighters may take over, may include binge drinking or drug use, sexual promiscuity, self-harm, thoughts of suicide or severe pain, anxiety or depression. So in this context, just as we know, the mind-body symptoms are simply different manifestations of protectors, your brain trying to protect you, not betray you. So sometimes that's helpful to people to think of this for people in this context. So it's not like, why is my brain against me? It's just trying to protect you based on the information it learned as a child. So the firefighters, again, you could think of this as that protection mechanism from your brain when there's a danger signal. And you may react with the 6 F's. Do you remember this from earlier in the book? The fear of them, the focus on them, fighting with them, frustration with them, trying to figure them out and trying to fix them. So when you have a symptom and you have any of these 6 F reactions, they create an increased pressure on ourselves, which leads to an increase in the danger alarm mechanism, thus creating even more pain and other symptoms. So basically, when we react with the 6 F's, we get more symptoms. Don't be hard on yourself. This is a normal way to react to symptoms. Just try to observe and notice when you're doing it. That's a good first start. Recognize that these protectors are simply different parts of us. We can examine them, understand them, and learn from them. They could be even seen as messengers of sorts, as a barometer of an underlying situation. I like to see that. I've seen that so often where I could be coaching someone, we talk about a sensitive subject and they get this pain down their leg, right? So it's like my brain trying to protect me from this situation it feels like is dangerous emotionally. Internal hurt or insecurity or emotional reaction that needs to be identified, explored, and processed, right? So thinking of it as when these triggers come up, it's just showing me, oh, here's something to be processed. Here's something now you're ready to process. You've got the tools. Let's do it, right? Instead of thinking, I'm not doing it right. I had another symptom. That means I haven't done it perfectly and I need to journal more. No, the symptoms will come up partially because this stuff, you're getting triggered by daily life things and it's ready to be healed. So you could have a dialogue with that protector part of your brain. Ask it these questions. What message do you have for me? What specifically are you protecting me from? What are you afraid would happen to me if you didn't take over my life? At what point in my life did you begin? How old was I? What was happening at that time? So you could ask yourself that, but when you take the time to actually write things out, you might even get a little more insight, because the time it takes to write things down, it slows your brain down enough that you can actually get some answers. So just having it with that sense of like, what is this protection about? Why are you protecting me? I've had so many people where they have something like a tightness in their throat when they think about a situation where they didn't stand up for themselves. And, when we try to like breathe into that area, it doesn't want to go away, right? So it's like something is very protective there and doesn't want to just loosen on its own. So this kind of stuff can help you get some deeper understanding of what's going on. But don't pressure yourself if you're not getting those answers like, this is the key to my healing. If only I knew what that one incident was. It's not like that either, right? We're kind of going at it from all these different angles, and there's no right way of who exactly you have dialogues with this week. Just start to trust that you'll have the right impression, the right insight at the right time. So other meditations for week 3 are the dialogue. It's the dialogue with the subconscious mind. Recognize that the subconscious has a child mind component and a parent mind component. Recognize that the subconscious is not always rational, yet we are able to communicate with it. And remember that our mind-body syndrome symptoms are fueled by the attention that we give them. The more we are preoccupied with the symptom, the more it has our attention and the more it thrives. When we continuously think about the pain, worry about it, and fear it, the more it's reinforced and ingrained in our brain and body. Roseanne says, you sure understand our brains. Well, Dr. Schubiner makes it really easy to understand in this context, right? And yeah, I understand definitely how our brains act like this. Doesn't mean mine doesn't. I still have a coach too. I need this kind of work for myself, but yeah, kind of nice to know. This is how our brains are. It's a normal brain, all these parts. So sometimes he suggests you can change the channel. Now, when we talked about like the previous chapter where we're like, this is next level stuff, I think it was chapter 6. Don't beat up on yourself if this is hard for you, if it's not easy to ignore, right? But if you could imagine that you're changing the channel from that fear and worry and preoccupation to other stuff. You could turn on music and dance, sing or reciting something out loud. That's why sometimes mantras work, but it has to be something that you're kind of believing, right? Changing the channel, not just I'm just turning the volume down, but I'm actually changing to something different. Participating in a physical activity, such as swinging a golf club, kicking a soccer ball, or knitting, can literally change the focus of your mind off the pain. And if you're the person who's like, but I can't do any of those things, and I can't do any of those physical things, there's even things like meditations where you focus on different parts of your body, like yoga nidra, and you can not even have to move, but you can change the channel by focusing on something different. And actually my last podcast, I'll just put in a little note for it because I forgot what episode it is, but Unstoppable Body and Mind, my most recent podcast, takes you through a way of distracting by using your peripheral vision. So you can actually reduce the intensity of your triggers by thinking about it and then doing the peripheral vision, and an exercise you can do to deactivate your triggers that way, right? So that is another example of changing the channel. When you can engage fully in the new activity and allow your mind to focus on that instead of the pain, then that will decrease how much your brain produces it. Okay. If you're putting pressure on yourself to recover quickly, if you are putting a timetable on your recovery, if you're desperately hoping that your symptoms will just magically disappear, then you're actually making it harder to recover. Yeah. So remind yourself about that. This last little part is, oh, yeah. And Mary says, the peripheral vision exercise was really helpful to me. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I love that one. It's really amazing how quickly you can create that change in your body. And Mary also says, I wrote a poem about my full circle relationship with my mom, her caregiving me as a child, to me caregiving her. It felt so good to look at our relationship that way. So much love, but yet so much strife too. Oh, I love that. Right. So it can be kind of bittersweet, but we can, like let all those emotions be there and realize we're not wrong for having any of them. So there's this last little worksheet section talking about things I make a commitment to doing. And we talked about this a little last week. It's a little review again. Yeah, the weeks. We just have some information that's repeated twice because of the old editions of the book. So just be gentle with yourself here. There's no award for doing it faster than anybody else, but maybe you can think of a few exercises, or sorry, not even exercises, activities, let's call them, that you want to do. And probably the ones that are more fun for you, the better, right? So we want to do things that are fun or can get our mind off it or can change the channel. They don't all have to be physical things, right? Maybe you're like, okay, I'm gonna listen to a non or I'm going to listen to a fiction book instead of just learning about pain, right? Like that could be something that you commit to doing. It doesn't have to be a physical activity. But this gets you started thinking of what you do want for yourself, right? We're not just doing this to decrease our symptoms and pain. We're doing this to find out what we do want in life. We want to feel more of how we do want to feel in life. And that only happens when we give ourselves some time to think about what we do want. And then, if you want to even commit to yourself, you can sign that and say, I commit to this activity by this date. And again, not to beat up on yourself and be really harsh with yourself, but that could be motivating to, pick a goal that's a stretch, but not a stress, is how I like to say it. You want to stretch, but not give yourself so much fear that, it's actually, overall a more stressful thing. So you could list the action, and then when do you plan on starting it? When do you plan on achieving it? How will you accomplish it? What steps do you need to take? Which ones will you do first? What kind of help or aid would you need? Who can help you? What strategies will you use to achieve your goals? And then think about what barriers might you encounter and how you will overcome them. So I know this feels like a lot for this week, so because it is. So again, just be kind with yourself. You don't have to do it all in these number of weeks. You could do more of the dialogues and not do as much of this. Um, or like Dr. Schubiner says, you can pick parts of the book that you do and leave other parts out. So don't stress out yourselves about that. Would the peripheral vision exercise work with an emotional trigger and not pain? Yes. Where does this exercise come from? Thanks. Yeah, I think we actually are done with the slides, so I can answer that. And yeah, uh, if you want a little demo, we can do that. R, I don't know your name, but if you don't want to, that's totally fine also. But this I learned from my coach. I knew about peripheral vision, but using the exercise in this exact way, she learned from her hypnotherapy teacher. So it's like a hypnotherapy technique, but peripheral vision is generally one of those things that you can hear of about calming the nervous system. Yeah, and you could do that with the camera off. Absolutely. In fact, I feel like we might have done this if you've watched all the replays or been here. I think we might have done this a week or two ago with Allison. So yeah, you can just unmute and We can talk through it. Does that sound okay? And we can all do it together. That's true. Yeah, I can just do, and yeah, PJ says we did last week. Yeah. Yeah, there's an example of it last week. But yeah, if you'd like to do it, we can do it. We have a few more minutes.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. This is Renee, by the way. I forgot to change my name.
Renee! Okay. Okay. Yeah, okay. I know you, Renee. Okay,
Yeah.
we could do this then. Okay. So let's have you just close your eyes and imagine that emotional trigger. You don't have to tell us too much about it or whatever. Just think of all of the circumstances. Think of what exactly is emotionally triggering to you. For me, it kind of comes up almost like a montage of clips in my head. When I think of something, I'm like, there's this event and this and this. How does that feel, Renee, when you're thinking of that?
Yeah, I can feel like a lot of anxiety. Just, yeah, like I can feel it as like vibrations in my middle, like my gut area.
Mm-hmm. And how strong from 0 to 10 would you rate them right now?
I would say about a 7 or 8.
Yeah. And a lot of times we can have huge emotional triggers that we're like, well, I guess I'll just avoid that person forever. But we can address it this way. So I'll have you open your eyes, find a spot you can look at, not on the computer screen, but on the wall. You could look at a corner of a painting or outside, something you can focus on. And then let your eyes soften as you continue to focus on it. Try to also let in more of your peripheral vision. And you guys who are listening along can do this as well. Trying to see more and more of what's on the sides of you. And also just opening your awareness as if you could see or sense that space behind you. And how does that feel, Renee?
Yeah, I'm feeling a little calmer.
Mm-hmm. And then you can close your eyes and think of that trigger or the situation or the circumstances again around that and just see this time, does it get as strong? Is it any softer?
Um, I feel like it's not as intense.
Okay. Yeah. And if it is the same, or if you thought of something else and it got more intense, that's okay. But if it feels like it's a little less intense, that's great too. Then you can open your eyes and find your spot, stare at that spot, and then start to open up more and more of that awareness of the room or the space around you, opening up the sides of the vision more and more till you can imagine what's behind you, sense it, maybe even imagine that you can sense what's below you or above you, and then see how that feels.
Yeah, that feels yeah, it feels really good. I feel a lot calmer, less triggered,
Mhm.
more grounded.
And then go ahead and close your eyes and think of that trigger again. Think of all the things about it. Just notice how that feels.
Ooh, this time it got a little, it heightened a little bit. Go
Mm.
ahead
Did
and
you
talk
think of
about
something new with
it.
it?
No,
No,
no, it was the
no.
same
Okay.
thing.
Okay. And that is totally fine, right? This is kind of how the brain can be. It's like training a puppy. We just want to be consistent. Oh, that's okay. Now I'll just go to the other and open my eyes and find that spot, stare at that spot, shift the focus. Really, this is like changing the channel, right? It's like changing the channel to what my vision is seeing, what my peripheral vision is seeing, what I sense in the space around me and below me and above me, just shifting that focus literally with the eyes, and how that shifts the state of the body. How does that feel?
Yep, I feel a lot calmer. It's a very deep wound that it's a like
Mhm.
trigger. It's this trigger that triggered a deep wound I have. So it's
Mm. Yeah. So sometimes, yeah, there's kind of multiple processes you can use. And I like this one for just like taking the edge off, right? Taking it down from like something that's really uncontrollable and strong. Like maybe we can take it down from a 9 or 7 down to like a 3 or 4, and then we can do some of that reframing and processing of it, right? Because a lot of times there probably will be some of those other emotions of anger, guilt, sadness, grief.
yeah, yeah,
So maybe if this isn't just to be like, okay, well, I'll just do this peripheral vision exercise a few times and never have that trigger again. It's or like, it's just going to get rid of it 100%. It might. That's
Mhm.
happened. You've seen that with some of the other people in our group. But if it doesn't, just knowing like, okay, this could be one tool in my toolbox to get it so I'm not so emotionally reactive, and then I can like actually see more what was going on and have more compassion for myself.
Yeah, yeah. No, this was great. Yeah, I never tried it on something like this. With
Oh, good. Okay, so you've tried it more on like a physical symptom.
I think you did it with me, or I did it with when you did it with someone else in coaching, but it was on like a discomfort in my body. But this was a purely like emotional
Yeah,
trigger. It
yeah.
felt different. It was good. It was most of the time it was really calm, except for one time when I thought about it with my eyes closed, it intensified a little bit, but it still
Mhm.
didn't get to the original, like
Yeah.
intense. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So
good.
it was good.
Yeah. Because part of this process, as you guys can see, and as we're learning, is like letting that stuff come up, letting those emotions come up, not worrying when symptoms intensify. Like, oh, it's okay, trust the process. Alan Gordon always says in his book, trust the process. So yeah, this is a great way to handle those emotional triggers. And then there's that memory reconsolidation where you can imagine something different for your inner child. Very cool stuff. I love helping with this kind of stuff because definitely it's we all have some kinds of things, some hurts and fears from our childhood, and really going through this and allowing all those emotions is so helpful for people who have that resistance to feeling some of them. And Mary says it really helps slow down breathing too, which is relaxing. Yeah, definitely. When you're doing that peripheral vision, it slows down the breathing, and anything you can do to calm your nervous system will help that decrease the pain, danger, alarm signal, and the brain will not only decrease it, but produce it less and less. So that's the big picture. All right, you guys, we did it. We're on to chapter 10 next week. So do as much or as little from this chapter as you want, and we'll go over chapter 10 together next week. All right, take care. Bye-bye.